in order to like counteract how much that might impact your cash flow, like we're like, okay, we need to pivot here, and we need to, in order for this to make sense for long-term hold, we're going to need to add a fifth unit in the basement
Hmm.
and figure out how to do that. So that's I guess like a kind of problems or profits moment.
Yeah, those are problems or profits moments right there, where you
Yeah.
definitely have to just keep going and getting to the end of that and swerving and being able to adapt.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Problems or Profits podcast. My name is Rebecca Lynn Matheson, aka the Canadian Cottage Girl, and today I'm joined by Austin Mulder, and we are going to riff all about Austin and talk about his business, talk about what he's doing in the real estate industry and beyond. So, just before we get into all of that, I just want to introduce what Problems or Profits really means to me. And for me, this is a mantra. This is a phrase that really stands for overcoming obstacles that are in your pathway. So you can go into any business situation and really have one of two approaches. And one is to overcome that obstacle, and the other is to just cower away from it. And I think this mantra really alludes to taking that step forward, whether it be failing forward, sprinting forward, swerving forward, whatever it might be in terms of the direction forward. But it's all about moving forward until you get to that level of success that you're looking for. And I'm really excited to interview Austin. He's actually been on our Wednesday webinar before, and certainly has done some pretty big things in the real estate space up to this point. So I'm excited to have you on today. Austin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be on another Problems or Profits event.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Always good having you. And from that perspective, I'd like to get started just with a few warm-up questions here that we always ask on the podcast. And then we'll get into the meat and potatoes here. So the first question that I have for you is, what is the most expensive thing that you've ever broken?
Ooh. Most expensive thing I've ever broken. My dad would probably have a list running somewhere. I get it from him though, so I come by it naturally. He destroys things all the time by accident. The most expensive thing I ever broken, I wrapped my mom's Jetta around a telephone pole when I was younger.
Cool.
So that was probably the most expensive thing. I fell asleep when I was driving. Thankfully, I was okay. It was just the
Yeah.
scariest way that I could possibly imagine waking up.
No
So
kidding.
that would probably be the most expensive thing. I've broken. I grew up working for my dad's construction company, so there was a lot of tools and pieces of equipment that got broken in that process. So I'm sure he would highlight those. But yeah.
Love it. Yeah, I can't imagine like falling asleep behind the wheel and waking up with like a pole in front of you. That must have been incredibly terrifying. So I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah.
Next question here, Austin, is if you had $1 million and only 24 hours to spend it before it disappears, what would you spend it on?
Ooh, $1 million, 24 hours to spend it. Can I invest it?
You can, but you have to invest it within 24 hours.
I have to invest it within 24 hours. The most pragmatic thing I would do is probably just dump it into some bonds or GICs while I figure out what to do with it in the longer term. You probably want a more exciting answer than that, though.
No, whatever answer like is realistic as to what you would do with it. I think it's a great answer. There's no right or wrong here.
Yeah, I wouldn't go on a spending spree. That's definitely the opposite of kind of what I would do with that. It would be I would try to be very methodical about how I spend it. So it would be about figuring out how to place it into something where I would have the time to do that.
Love that. Next question is, what makes you you?
What makes me me? Huh. I'm sure there's other people in my life that might be able to answer this better. I I don't know. I'm passionate about real estate. I think that's something a lot of people would highlight. Um, I love to hang out with friends and spend my time in that way as well. Love to hang out with my dog. I work a lot. That's probably a defining factor of my personality. But yeah, I'm constantly trying to find the balance between working hard and then also spending time with all of my friends and family. So family's really important, friends are really important, and working hard is really important. So
Awesome. Love that.
yeah.
Well, that actually bridges really well into my first real question for you, Austin, which I'd love just for some context for you to introduce yourself. I know you've been doing quite a lot in the real estate space, which is how we met. And then you are also doing some stuff in the lending space. So I'd love to just have a little bit of a rundown as to what all you do and what you're focused on right now in your career.
Yeah. So what do I do? I currently work as a commercial mortgage specialist. I also invest in real estate. So I guess I can start with how I got my start. My dad was a real estate investor. He started around 2008, 2009, always told me to buy real estate as soon as I could. So naturally in university, I figured out a way to buy a duplex with some partners. And then added value there. They ended up buying me out when I graduated from university, and then I took that money and started investing in Hamilton. During this time, I was working at BMO as a commercial underwriter. So I did underwriting and an analysis for loans for businesses and real estate investors and anyone that's obtaining commercial financing, whether it be operating financing for a business or equipment financing or real estate financing. So around that, and then from there I moved into being a relationship manager with the Bank of Montreal in the business bank, and then ultimately senior relationship manager in the commercial bank. And then I have since moved to the dark side, as it were, doing brokering. So no longer working at an institution. Now I'm doing brokering for clients that are looking for help with their real estate financing for large commercial deals. So that's kind of what I specialize in now. And then as far as my real estate investing journey, there's been several projects that my cousin, who's my primary business partner, have done in Hamilton. Flips. Buy and holds is our main strategy, but we have inadvertently sold some of those assets, and that's kind of turned into be more like a flip type project. So we've done several multifamily projects in Hamilton, kind of focusing on large brick century home multifamily conversions, like triplexes and fourplexes, and then we also have with Mitchell, we have a large commercial building in Simcoe, Ontario, that we're converting 10 units of office space that we're converting into 5 units of residential on the second floor and 5 units of commercial on the main floor. I actually just went to visit that site on Saturday, and it's just been completely gutted. I know you were thinking of coming down and taking a video and stuff. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
an open box right now. Ready
it.
for plumbing and well, framing and then plumbing and electrical to go in. So that's a really fun project. Mitchell and we also have a flip that we're doing in Paris, Ontario right now.
Yeah.
And then I have my partnership with Rob Clark, who's a close friend and mentor of mine, and we're buying stuff up north. So we have several houses in Sault Ste. Marie. Single family homes in Sault Ste. Marie, and then a 26 unit portfolio in Cobalt, Ontario, which your viewers probably have not heard of, but I encourage them to Google it. It's kind of halfway between Sudbury and Kirkland Lake. It's in Temiskaming Shores. It's a beautiful area, and you can buy some cash flowing properties for really cheap. So we ended up buying these 26 units under $20,000 a door. So we're putting a bunch of money into it, rehabbing it, and they're going to be some pretty solid assets when we're done with them. So that's kind of where I'm at now as far as the investing goes, and then also my professional
I
career.
love that. Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack there, so we'll break it down from a few different elements that I'd love to explore with you. But guys, if you want to see actually one of Austin's current ongoing projects, by the time this podcast release, it will be up on my Instagram account on an IGTV story at Rebecca Lynn Matheson. Austin and I actually went through and toured one of his most recent projects down in Hamilton, Ontario, and we got to see kind of the ins and outs of the project just finishing up, and some really cool stories as to lots of problems or profits moments in that particular project in and of itself. So definitely, if you guys are looking for a project that went completely south in some elements and then got completely turned around, and you ended up still coming out on the other side very successfully with that project, make sure you check that out on my IGTV. But I'd love to actually just start with that first ever duplex that you got in university, because I feel like that is just a really good foundational story for a lot of investors to hear, of like getting into that first project, what that looked like. Because you took on some partners originally. So
yeah,
I'd love to hear about how that went, about the process of being bought out, and what all of those elements look like. Because on a micro level, like buying a piece of real estate is kind of like running a business in essence. And you talking about being bought out from a property is very similar to being bought out of a business in essence, and when you kind of break it down high level. So I'd love to just hear about how you got into that first project, and what was the results there in terms of the buyout.
Yeah, so basically the way I got into it is I guess, and this is kind of a lesson for anyone, is if you have a goal to do something, make sure a lot of people are aware of it, because you'd be surprised the support and resources that come your way once people know what you're trying to achieve. So this is kind of an example of how that worked out for me. My friend Dan, who is a good buddy of mine, he was very aware that I was looking to purchase a property. Didn't know how I was going to do it, but he was also looking to purchase a property, and he didn't know how he was going to handle the renos or whatnot. And me, coming from a bit of a construction background, I was able to kind of take the lead on that with his help. So we found this property, and funny enough, I sent him the property, and he said that he already had a viewing booked that day. So we went and we viewed the property together, and we ultimately worked out a deal where his brother came in on it as well and brought some money to the table. And I was basically trading my labor for equity, labor and expertise for equity. So I did a lot of the renovation work on that while I was in university, and we were able to. It was an illegal duplex when we bought it, and we were able to quickly convert it to a legal non-conforming status with the city. So there was some knowledge that was required in order to do that as well. And then ultimately, like, I think we put 50,000 into it, and we bought it for 225. And then it came time where I was finishing school, and we were looking at the thing, and I was like, if we're gonna hold this going forward, I don't know if we want to have that many partners. There's this saying where it doesn't really apply that much here, but it's like odd numbers of partners are bad, and three's too many. So it's a joke about how yeah. I definitely don't embody that. I've heard people say it though, but three in my opinion is a lot of partners to have on a deal, and that was kind of what we were like, okay, so do I we talked about maybe my dad purchasing them out, Dan and his brother, or them buying me out. And what we ultimately decided was that they would buy me out. It was completely amicable, and I'm still good friends with both of them to this day. But we were able to both go our separate ways and do different real estate deals. So I was purchased out. I think it was purchased out at like 450. So, and we had 275, 280 into it. So it worked out to a decent chunk of change coming into my pocket when I graduated university, and enough for me to go to Hamilton at probably one of the best times in hindsight, and start purchasing houses there with my cousin Mitchell.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, did you take a portion of that buyout? So let's say you decided the valuation at that point in times for, you said 425, something around that kind of 400
450,
range.
yeah.
You were all in the mid 200s. So then you just split up the remainder. Is that how you did it, or?
Yeah, so the amount of equity that was in the property,
Yeah.
we just basically did slice that 3 ways, and then they paid me my third, and
Nice.
I signed over title to them.
Right on. And then did they end up holding that property?
I believe the one partner ended up buying out his brother, and then he held it for a time, and then he just sold it this year, I believe. And did
Yes.
really well on it.
I was gonna say, to
Yeah.
buy a even non-conforming duplex in London for anywhere with a
this
2
was
starting in
Guelph,
front of it.
This was Guelph, actually.
Oh, this was in Guelph.
So,
Okay, got it.
yeah. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I think on the sale there was a 6 at the front of it, so he did really well
Did
for
well.
holding that.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's wicked awesome to even just be in university going through that and be able to exit with a project like that at the end. Really good finish to a university education with having a money in surplus, because you've essentially sold a business at the end of your university, which is
but
incredible.
I think we would be doing the viewers a disservice if we just said, oh yeah, I just graduated with a big chunk of change in my pocket and it was a wonderful deal, right? I ended up I took a semester off of school to renovate it as well too. So I delayed my university because we needed to get it done. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to be working on it full time to get it finished, right?
Right.
And that was one of the sacrifices that I had to make, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. In hindsight, right? So I think sometimes in life we're confronted with these decisions that you might seem like a difficult decision to make at the moment, or it might not be the right decision, like delaying school for a semester to complete a project, right? I know a lot of parents that would be like, no, you're silly to do that. Like that's a stupid idea.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, it was the best thing I could have done at that time. Right.
Absolutely. Well, and now you're doing it full time, right? So it really was literally the best thing that you could have done. That's awesome. Okay, let's get into some of the other projects that you've done since then, and you've also had quite a career jumping up and across the scales of lending, which is kind of cool, and working in different various financial institutions. So I'd love to hear about the trajectory there. Why did you get into working across lending and working in financial institutions? What kind of drew you there, and how do you think that that's actually helped your investing career?
Yeah. So how did I get there? Dan, the same partner that I own the house with, he knew one year I was looking to get out of the construction business that I had been working in for 7, 8 years every summer, and branch out into something more formal. So he made the suggestion that I apply to an internship with the Bank of Montreal. And that was basically doing data conversion between outgoing and onboarding software. So I spent the summer doing that, got really well acquainted with all of their commercial lending systems. So even though I wasn't in a business program, I studied politics in school, in university. Even though I wasn't in a business program, they invited me back for an actual analyst internship, because I was so well acquainted with all of their systems by that point that it was just easier. They didn't have to train me on any of them. So, and then while I was working as an analyst intern, I saw the relationship managers and sort of the lifestyle and the work that they were doing and the kind of cool deals that they were financing and stuff like that. And I was like, I want to be one of those. Because it's a pretty cool job, and you get to interact with a lot of clients, and I enjoy interacting with people. So then when I finished that internship, I was graduating school the next year, and I interviewed for an analyst position full time at BMO. And again, kind of getting back to the point of making people aware of what your goals are. So when they were interviewing me, they said, "Where do you see yourself here in like 5 years?" And I said, honestly, I see myself as a relationship manager. This role, I see the analyst role as being foundational for that job, but I don't see myself as an analyst. And I told that to the person that was interviewing me for the analyst position, right?
Yeah.
And I was very open with her, and I said, listen, I don't see myself as being an analyst. So the goal is to do this job, learn how to do it well, and then move to a relationship manager role. And within 1 year of being hired as a full-time analyst, I was moved into a relationship manager role because everyone was aware that was where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then worked as a relationship manager in Niagara Falls for 3 years. Initially focusing on healthcare financing, so acquisitions for pharmacies and doctors' offices and whatnot, and also startups. And then transitioning to focusing more on real estate financing near the end. And that's kind of how I got involved with my good friends and mentors, Dylan and Robbie, like Dylan Suter and Rob Clark.
Yep.
So I've been doing some financings for them prior to leaving BMO. So yeah, it kind of became very overlapped with my investing and also my work at BMO. Because I was focused so heavily on real estate, and then it was kind of a natural progression to move into brokering as well. So
Absolutely. Now, you moved obviously into a niche space as well in brokering in itself, being in commercials. So, what drew you into that? And I guess from that perspective, did you consider other avenues?
So initially, like when I was working at BMO, I was focused on business financing, like underwriting loans for businesses. So
Yep.
that'd be operating financing, like lines of credits, equipment purchases, business buildings for their businesses, all of those acquisition financing, like so for M&A, like mergers and acquisitions. So and then the real estate, like a lot of the fundamentals are kind of the same. And having that real estate bone, like doing real estate investing myself, I kind of gravitated towards doing more real estate deals. And the reason, like, it's commercial real estate loans are a lot different than residential. With commercial, I guess I should start with residential. It's very like square peg, square hole. Like if you fit the box, you're good. If not, there's not a lot of flexibility in that space when it comes to the lending side of things.
Right.
So it's not as interesting to me because it's not as creative of an endeavor. I'm not trying to knock residential mortgages or anything like that, but it's just for me. I find commercial financing way more creative and stimulating in that respect. So that, I guess that's kind of why I honed in on that niche, is because no deal's the same, and you can have 5 different lenders, commercial lenders, look at a single deal, and ask them how to structure it, and you'll come out with 5 different loans or 5 different structures, right? So there's a bit of an art to it, and getting it done in the most effective and beneficial way to the client, and I find that fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, when you're in the residential space, it's also very much based off of the individual, whereas the commercial space, it's also based off of like the individual's character, but it's more based off of the actual project. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Now, from kind of switching gears a little bit, going into your investing journey. So that was your first project, the duplex, when you were in university. And what's been, I guess, your favorite projects to take on nowadays? So you mentioned obviously you have this really interesting conversion project going on right now down in Simcoe, and then we
Yeah.
obviously got to tour through one of your Hamilton projects. But what are some of the more interesting projects that you've been a part of, or what kind of piques your interest now in the investing space?
So Simcoe is very interesting to me, and I think it's kind of indicative of where I want to be going, and Mitchell and I want to be going as far as our business model.
Yeah.
It's an adaptive reuse project, so it's taking like an old building that's like, maybe it's office space, maybe it's institutional, maybe it's this or that. And I know we've talked about this on the webinar as well.
Mhm.
Super underutilized, not near its highest and best use, and having a creative perspective on that and how to adjust its use to residential, but also in the most um, efficient and profitable way, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's a great example of it, and we're always trying to look for projects like that. A little bit out of necessity. Like right now, a lot of the projects, like for the larger commercial multifamily projects that you are encountering on the market, like they're all sold at like 3.5% cap rates that are way under rented. And
Mhm.
the only way that you can really make money on these projects is if you go and get all the tenants out, right? Like cash for
Yeah.
keys all the tenants. Um, which I don't see you having a lot of control over. And like, to me, in a housing market where it's so unaffordable and you have such a lack of supply, displacing people as just like a baseline business model doesn't sit too well with me. So that's why I'm trying to take the focus move the focus onto finding these underutilized properties and maybe vacant properties, and how do we take that and take something that isn't already housing stock and create more housing stock out of existing buildings, right? So,
Absolutely.
and I think it's a better way to approach the problem that's on our hands, which is just a lack of housing. So that's kind of where I'm targeting what we're doing, and Simcoe is a great example of that. Like, it's a 10,000 square foot office building. And we're currently converting the second 5,000 square feet into 3 2-bedroom units and 2 1-bedroom units. And we're also toying with the idea of potentially converting some of the main floor space to residential as well. So it's a fun project. It's a very profitable project, but it's also a project that's taking something that's completely underutilized. Like, Simcoe doesn't need 10,000 square feet of more office space right now.
Mhm.
Simcoe needs housing because there's the vacancy rate is so ridiculously low. And also, when you're working with this strategy, what we've discovered is that because it aligns with what the city wants, wherever you're
Mhm.
working this strategy, you have a lot less friction to doing whatever you're doing, because the city's like, oh, you're doing that, okay, let's go,
Yeah.
right?
So
So
let's hear about some of the obstacles that you might face in some of these projects, because I've seen actually several of these pop up. It seems to be the trend right now is to convert some sort of space that isn't functioning as a commercial space or functioning as churches, bowling alleys I've seen converted. Like, there's a bunch of really cool niche little projects right now that are going on, and I love it because, as you said, you are solving the city's problem. And we've seen across the real estate industry over the past couple of years, obviously price points have been soaring, but that's a direct reflection of the inventory. We've had so little inventory that people are going to multiple bids on the same property, whereas that wasn't happening as frequently before. And now when we get into economic trends, high level, as we start to see immigration pick up in Canada, we already don't have enough inventory on market to purchase a house, let alone vacancy rates in rentals are way down. So we have no stock of rentals and no inventory for people to buy houses. So how do we solve that problem? Well, we have to make more. We have to add more to the market, and developments can take forever in terms of like multi-year projects where you are like buying the land, you're servicing the land, you're digging the hole, you've got all of the elements to it. If you can just take an existing building and convert it into something that is beautiful, something that's livable, and something that's, as you said, solves the city's problems, then you can really work from all sides to, yes, it's profitable for you, as it as it should be when you're investing all of this time and energy and effort in, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. And from that perspective, we need to incentivize more investors to do these sorts of projects. So what are all of the challenges that you're seeing, or what are all the steps, I guess, that you have to overcome in order to actually get into one of these projects?
So some of it is just finding the project, like finding something that, like, so for Simcoe, for instance, it was kind of like a perfect storm as far as the entitlements that it had just by virtue of how it was zoned.
Yeah.
It was a CBD zoning, which is Central Business District zoning in the town of Simcoe, which allowed everything that we wanted to do for the particular property. So we didn't have to go through a rezoning process. We didn't have to do site plan or anything like that. And because of that, we were able to quickly get the approvals, get the building permit, and move forward with the project. I think some of the problems that you might encounter is that you have these spaces that are they're ready to be converted into like a nice adaptive reuse residential space, but they'll carry like an institutional zoning on them or something like that, or a restrictive commercial zoning on it. So then what you'll have to overcome in a situation like that is a rezoning process. But the thing that you have to your benefit is the fact that almost every single municipality is eager to have these projects take place.
Yeah.
So I know, for instance, Hamilton District School Board right now is unloading like half a dozen surplus properties that they have. One of them being Delta High School. I think it's just finishing up the public tender process right now.
Yeah.
But these are all assets that are municipally owned. They're underutilized, or they're not utilized at all, and they're looking to sell them. Another, like, we might be getting off topic here, is that there's vacant buildings too. Like, knock on doors, look for people that have vacant buildings. I'm a proponent of, and this might be unpopular, but I'm a proponent of a vacancy tax in the city of Hamilton. I think the vacancy rate is way too low for hundreds of rental units to be sitting vacant by landlords that are just holding them for whatever reason. So I think that there should be like a multiple applied to the property tax if your building's deemed to be sitting vacant. And I think that would just encourage some of these owners that are owning these assets that are just ripe for redevelopment or repurpose to look at these other solutions, like look at how they might be able to apply some of these principles to repurposing their building and solving this problem that the city wants them to solve. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting concept, because certainly a lot of that does exist. And in some of these cities where vacancy is an issue, like those are units that could go to somebody, even in the interim, even in the short term. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. So you mentioned a few things about the kind of challenges to get in. So number one is just finding the place. Once you've actually found the place, what are the next steps? So there has to be, because it's not a residential building, it's going to have to be converted into that. There's obviously an element of commercial financing that you're going to have to go down. And obviously with you're an expert in that. So that like no problem. But for the everyday average investor, like what are the differences? What are the things that they're going to have to consider? Because they don't have the income to actually like show when they're applying for the mortgage. So there's extra layers of projections and things. So what would somebody have to do if they find one of these unique buildings? Maybe it's currently an office space or currently some other form of business. What would step one be once they've actually found that building?
Yeah, so step one would be like obviously making sure that you have an adequate amount of due diligence time on the agreement of purchase and sale. Like you want to have at least 30 days if you're looking at a project like this, preferably like 60. Because you need to have time to get an appraisal. You need to have time to get some drawings done up. So for like if you're proposing a reuse project and you want to go to a lender, typically the property might be vacant or it might be severely under rented for what you paid for it. The lender's not going to be lending on the income that you have. So what you need to do is you need to be able to tell a story to the lender about what your plan is for the property, and that comes along with projections for the income and expense once you're done. Probably drawings, like getting an architect to quickly draw. That's what we did on Simcoe. We had drawings done up prior to even firming up on the deal.
Yeah.
About what we wanted to do, and then then you put those together, and then you have a story to go to the lender with and a story to go to the appraiser with, because you also probably want to get an as is and an as complete appraisal. The as is just going to be what the appraiser values the property at as it sits, and then the as complete is you're going to give the appraiser the designs that you have, as well as the pro forma that you've created based on those designs, what you anticipate the rents are, what you anticipate the expenses are, and then they'll provide you an as complete valuation on that as well. And that's going to be kind of like your ammunition to go to the lender with and be like, hey, this is what we're going to do with this project. Here's the quote that we also got from the contractor to do this work that's designed here, and it's going to result in this pro forma, and here's the appraisal saying what it's worth when we're done, right?
Yeah.
So then you're telling a very complete, clear story about your plan that you have for the property to the lender before you're even firming up. And then the lender can be like, okay, this person knows what they're doing. Like, they have a concise plan, have a contractor lined up. They're going to be good to go here. And then what they'll do is they'll work out some sort of arrangement. Like, we have a really creative financing arrangement that we've done on this particular property. But there are lenders that if you have some money to bring to the table, they'll be able to sort that out, and you can cross leverage other properties that you have as well, or they'll do a construction financing situation where they'll do draws as you progress through the construction of the property, which is kind of what we're doing on this project. So it's yeah, I guess the main thing is, from a financing perspective, work with someone who understands number one, what to do, and then what lenders to send it to as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as you mentioned, there are so many pathways, and each lender will kind of come up with their own strategies. It's definitely important, not all not all mortgage brokers are created the same. Like, they are independently run, and sometimes they're working for themselves. Sometimes they're working with a company. So their ability to leverage funding can sometimes come based off of their networking abilities or their specific niche. So it is definitely important that you understand your why, as well as work with someone who's done it before. Maybe somebody who has projects ongoing that understands what you're trying to accomplish. I always recommend, if you're looking for an accountant, that you look for an accountant with more units than you, so that they can understand what you're trying to accomplish. And that same thing goes for all across your power team. So I think that that's a really important thing to consider here. But really appreciate that, Austin. So now that we've gotten through all of that, now you close on the property, you go through the plan, you've set out this great action plan during the due diligence period. Now you've closed on the property, and now you're actually implementing. And by the sounds of it, the way you have it set up is, once you get to a certain percentage, then you draw more funding. And then once you get to another percentage of completion, then you draw more funding until you get to the end. And then you actually execute on renting out those units. So do you have a specific strategy on how you plan to get through certain phases? Or once you get to the end of the line, do you usually use somebody else to take care of property management? Or how do you have your business set up?
Yeah, so my partner Mitchell, he's running project management on this. So I'm running all the financial behind the scenes, making sure the money's in the account when the contractor needs to get paid, which is very important. And then and then I also manage like the takeout financing, appraisals, all of that sort of thing. And then from a financing perspective, like we had acquisition financing to acquire the building initially, and then we went through the permitting process and everything like that. and now we're into a different set of financing now that we're starting construction. So we're putting in a bit of our equity to get the project to a point where the construction lender is comfortable with the amount of equity that we've put into the project, and then they'll start advancing their construction funds to complete the project. Then that's just another threshold that some lenders have. They want to see that you have a certain amount of equity in the property. We purchased the property with 100% financing, so when we went for construction financing, they're like, no, you got to put in a couple $100,000 before we're going to start advancing funds to you. So we did. That's what we're doing right now. So we're front ending the construction funding, and then our lender is going to come in and top us up once we get our equity into the project. And that's the same thing with a lot of these higher risk projects. It's pretty standard for lenders to want to see that you have a certain amount of skin in the game.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding what that is and how to structure it. And like I said, with commercial, there's probably about a dozen other ways that we could have structured the financing for this deal. Mm-hmm. This is just the way that made the most sense for us. Probably the cheapest on interest, but I had 3 other options to finance the construction here, and this just ended up being the one that made the most sense. So, yeah.
Love that. Now, you've obviously done several projects at this point. So do you have any like nightmare stories for us today? Anything that went really awry in a project? Like what's your worst project?
It was probably that Wellington one that you came through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go high level over that story because I actually love this story. For the full story, guys, definitely check out the IGTV. It will be out on my Instagram page by the time this podcast launches. Yeah. But let's just talk about it because I love this project story.
This project, like all of our contractors hate this project too. Like, it would just be miserable when they had to work there, just because it dragged on so long. It was so over budget, and it's the quintessential like market saved us like on this one. So we bought this. It was a fourplex that we bought off of another wholesaler, and it was in Hamilton. We bought it for $600,000 off this wholesaler. We have money partners on this one, Corbin and Mandy, who are great. They've been very patient through the whole process and great to work with. So the project, we bought it and it was a fourplex, and we were just going to do like a little blitzkrieg commercial cosmetic refresh on it, just to get it rented. Cheap little, well, I say cheap, 200 grand was the budget, but we were doing windows, roof, flooring, paint, kitchens, bath, everything for 4 units, right? So 200 grand is it makes sense for that. And then COVID hit. And there was this period where you weren't supposed to be running a construction site unless it was a permitted construction site. And we were running, it wasn't permitted, and we were still running guys on it. So they came and they slapped us with a stop work order, and we had to go apply for permits now. Even though I was making the argument that everything we were doing was basically cosmetic, but they still made us apply for permits. And that's when we found out that despite the due diligence that ourselves and the wholesaler had done, it wasn't actually a legal fourplex. Even though we had evidence that it was operating as such since the 80s, it was technically a rooming house, even though it was very clearly a fourplex and was a fourplex in the 80s. So now we're dealing with the zoning. Thank God, the zoning permitted a fourplex, so we didn't have to do a minor variance or anything like that. But we did have to apply for permits and do things like replace the back fire exit, which costs $35,000, and add fire shutters to the windows around the fire exit, which costs $8,000, and then design the fire exit, which is $5,000, and then pay for permits and parkland dedication fees. Parkland dedication fees alone were $8,000. Permits and designs is $15,000, right? So all of these things like really start adding up, and then we're having to do other things on the reno that we weren't initially planning on doing, and we're like, well, if we're doing this, we might as well gut half of it anyways. Like, redid the roof, we had to redo the whole HVAC system because you can't have 4 units with 1 furnace. The max is 2. So ripped the HVAC system out, all new mini splits, baseboard heaters, which is the way we prefer to do it anyways. It just, we didn't budget for it. So yeah, we ended up with carrying costs and everything. The project ended up costing about $150,000 more than what we anticipated. And then, so COVID, you got to imagine, like, this is in May and June, fresh on the COVID, and when we get our stop work order and we're trying to apply for permits, and we had no idea what the hell was going to happen with the market, or where we were going to be in 8 months when we had to 10 months when we had to refinance this thing. And so we're looking at higher expenses, way longer time on the construction, so holding costs are going sideways as well too. And Lord knows what the value is going to be when we're done, because everyone was kind of like, is the market going to tank? Like, what's going to happen here? And we're halfway through a project right now. So we trucked on with getting the approvals. Guys were off the site for about 7 months when we were trying to sort out I think we went back and forth on the angle on the staircase with the city designer for about a month. So that was fun. Thank you, Hamilton. And then we finally got the green light, and then it was gangbusters. Like, finished the project in, the bulk of it was done in about 6 months, right? Which was, we had guys there every day just giving her. And then fortunately, we all know the story. The market went a little crazy during that time, and we managed to do basically a full burr. I think our partners got almost all of their capital back when we refinanced it, because we were about 400 into it on the reno and holding costs. Purchased it for 6, and it reappraised when we were done for 1.25. So we were able to get all of their capital out, or the majority of it.
That's wild.
Yeah.
To go from a 600,000 purchase price to a 1.25 valuation in the end is like such a big turnaround. I mean, you put over 350,000 into it, but still.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful property. I guess people will see it on your Instagram story. But yeah, it's a beautiful property. All the tenants are moved in. They all love it. We have this nasty habit of over renovating some things. Like, there's heated floors in all the bathrooms and everything like that. But I don't know. I think I like it. We have this sort of thing. Like, we don't really build units that we wouldn't live in ourselves. So every single unit that we've built is somewhere where we have or would live in, right?
Yeah.
So
I think that's important though. And personally, having been through each of the units and seen your project, like, yeah, I would live in any one of those units, and it's, you're going to get a different tenant quality when you do that. And I think that is important from a longevity of the building perspective, and also just a property management perspective. Like, you're going to have to deal with a lot less phone calls and tenant issues when you can actually get the right people in place. So although it might feel like you're over renovating it, and oftentimes there is too far when it comes to over renovating, but those little things do add up. And when you're showing a tenant around a place, if you spend an extra $5,000 just to kit it out and make sure the whole building is like pristine and nice, you'll get that in just like free time of not having to deal with tenants down the road.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that story. Definitely, guys, check out the full video and check out the project update, because it is a cool one. And I think it's just such a wild story to go through all of those challenges during COVID. I know you were slapped with a lot more when it came to that permitting process, going through overcoming it being a boarding house somehow, even though it was operating as a fourplex since the 80s. Like, some of those weird things come up in projects, and those are definitely moments where, those are problems or profits moments right there, where you definitely have to just keep going and getting to the end of that and swerving and being able to adapt. And in this case, the market certainly helped with the outcome, which is amazing.
But there's if we weren't able to, there's still a plan to put a 5th unit in the basement on this property.
Oh, great.
There's about 500 square feet of space for a unit and full ceiling height in the basement. So there's still that plan. And then, so even if we didn't get a full burr, we never had the plan to add that 5th unit in the basement. But we added that plan on because of how poorly the project went. We added that on because we're like, okay, in order for this to make sense, given how much money we spent here, because when you add an additional, even though the market went up, our rents didn't go up. So when you add an additional $200,000 that you weren't planning on having on your mortgage, that's an extra $5, $6, $7, no, it's $800 a month that you weren't anticipating having on your mortgage, right?
Right.
So in order to counteract how much that might impact your cash flow, we're okay, we need to pivot here, and we need to, in order for this to make sense for long-term hold, we're going to need to add a 5th unit in the basement and figure out how to do that. So that's I guess a kind of problems or profits moment there is we're dealt with this card of a much lower cash flow than what we were anticipating and what we told our investors on.
Yep.
How are we going to solve that? Okay, we're going to figure out how to put another unit in the basement, even though it was not even in the cards at the beginning of the project. So, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it's so important to find all of the possible exit strategies when you're in any project. So it's such a big swerve, but so important to be able to see those. Not everyone will see the opportunities that are in front of them. So definitely appreciate that. Now, we talked through some opportunities in the commercial space and conversion space. So what are some other opportunities right now in the real estate investing game or in the lending game that maybe a young, inspiring entrepreneur could step right into and take on, that maybe Austin doesn't have time for, but it's still a great opportunity for someone in the space that you see right now?
Yeah, if Austin had all the time in the world, what would he do?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are doing wholesaling right now, for better or for worse. So that's one thing that you can do. It's pretty easy to get into that and get up to speed on that, and how to provide some value there. I think some of the stuff that's still sort of on the periphery, thinking northern towns, out east, all of those places. If I was younger, just looking at how cheap some of these towns are, I would probably be moving up to some of those towns and either just going gangbusters flipping. I know there's some people that are doing that in Sault Ste. Marie right now. I think in Sault Ste. Marie, there's a lot of money to be made with flipping. There's a lot of properties there that are in really rough shape. So if you're comfortable running construction, you can be picking those up and renovating them and relisting them on the market. And I think you could be making a tidy profit doing that. There's still some areas in Southern Ontario that I think are completely underpriced as well too, like Port Colborne. I was talking to a client today about some buildings that he has out there. I think Chatham is still underpriced. Sarnia is still underpriced. So those are places that I would still be looking. But yeah, these northern towns, you can pick up units that'll be renting for $1,000, and you can be picking them up for $40,000-$50,000. They'll need a bit of work, but if you're able to put in that work and be that in those towns for people that have capital to invest down here, because there's an insane amount of capital that's just ready to invest. They're just looking for the deals because there's no inventory. So if you're able to position yourself as the expert that's able to manage renos up north, for investors that are down here, and JV with people like that, I think that there's a huge opportunity for that. And the cash flow is incredible up there. these in these cities that are completely like under the cost to build and still at rents that are pretty standard for rural Ontario. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity up there that hasn't been tapped. Like it started like Sault Ste. Marie is pretty active right now on the market, but I think it still has a long way to go.
Love it. Well, Austin, thank you again for coming on to one of the final episodes of season 2 of the Problems or Profits podcast here. And always a pleasure chatting with you. Before we wrap up here, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm not super active on Instagram, but you'll drop it in the show notes. I'll have our company Instagram, and that's kind of where I post all the real estate stuff that we have on the go, and then my personal Instagram as well. And then I'll give Rebecca my phone number also, and people can just give me a shout on my cell if they want to chat about commercial real estate with me further, or financing, or they need help with financing, development financing, anything. I just love talking about real estate, so give me a shout.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for tuning in, for everyone for tuning in. And Austin, thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Problems or Profits podcast. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Cheers.